Some stories aren't just told, they're warned about. They're whispered in hushed tones, passed down through generations like a hereditary curse. They are the legends that feel so terrifyingly real, they seem to claw their way out of the very earth they were born from. The line between a chilling tale and a dark chapter of history becomes so blurred, you can no longer tell them apart. Tonight, on History's Chronicles of Horror, we're digging one of those stories up. It's the tale of a forgotten little township that, by all accounts, never even existed. A place called Oakhaven. And at the black heart of this story stands a woman whose name has become a vessel for our deepest fears about the evil that can hide behind a gentle smile. As the legend tells it, her name was Thelma C. Gordon. To her neighbors, she was a charming widow. Her home was a beacon of warmth, and her garden was a paradise of color. But just beneath the pristine blooms, a monstrous secret was taking root. Because it's in that very garden, under the watchful eyes of the roses and the hyacinths, that the legend of Oakhaven claims Thelma buried 47 men. 47 lovers who fell for her deadly charm, only to find their final resting place in the cold, dark soil. This is the story of the woman who, according to legend, planted a garden over the graves of her lovers. And you won't believe where the truth is buried. You can't appreciate the true horror of a monster without first falling in love with the mask it wears. And Thelma C. Gordon's mask was perfect. In the fictional 19th century hamlet of Oakhaven, a place you'd picture on a postcard, Thelma wasn't a monster. She was an institution. The town's benevolent widow, a picture of grace, piety, and quiet strength. Her quaint Victorian cottage, with its white picket fence and gently swaying porch swing, was seen as a sanctuary of peace. As the story goes, Mrs. Gordon was a pillar of the community. You could hear her steady, sweet voice in the church choir every Sunday. Her donations to local charities were always generous and always anonymous. When a family fell on hard times, Thelma was the first at their door with a hot meal and a comforting word. To the unsuspecting eyes of Oakhaven, she was the absolute ideal of womanly virtue, demure, compassionate, and utterly harmless. But the crown jewel of her idyllic life was her garden. It was famous throughout the county. People would supposedly stop their carriages on the road just to admire the explosion of color spilling over her fence. Thelma's roses were said to be the most fragrant, her lilies the most vibrant. The soil itself seemed almost supernaturally fertile. She was often seen there at dawn and dusk, a solitary figure in a wide-brimmed hat, tending to her flower beds with a serene focus that her neighbors found deeply admirable. They saw a woman nurturing life, finding solace in the earth after the tragic and timely death of her beloved husband. Gordon, the story explains, had been a well-respected man. His sudden death from a fever had cast Thelma into the sympathetic role of the grieving widow, and she played the part to perfection. Her mourning was public enough to seem proper, but private enough to garner respect. She was a woman who had faced loss and emerged with a quiet dignity, channeling all her sorrow into the breathtaking beauty of her garden. It's no surprise that men were drawn to her. In an age where a lone woman was often seen as vulnerable, Thelma projected a soft, gentle competence. She was the perfect companion, a brilliant cook, a captivating storyteller, and a woman who seemed to understand the deep loneliness of the human heart. One by one, suitors came calling. They were almost always men from out-of-town traveling merchants, ranchers with newfound wealth, or bachelors looking to finally settle down. They saw Thelma Gordon and saw their chance at a peaceful, respectable life. She welcomed them with open arms, offering a warm meal, a listening ear, and the unspoken promise of companionship. They would be seen in town with her, perhaps enjoying a quiet stroll through that magnificent garden. And then they would be gone. But in a place like Oakhaven, during the transient times of the 19th century, Disappearances weren't an immediate cause for alarm. Men moved on for work, for land, for gold. They came and went. When a salesman, who'd been courting Mrs. Gordon, was no longer seen, it was assumed he'd simply moved on to the next town. When a wealthy widower vanished after a few weeks of visiting her, the townsfolk figured he'd returned to his own life, perhaps finding Oakhaven a little too quiet for his tastes. Thelma, for her part, would express a delicate, believable disappointment. He was such a charming man, she might sigh to the postmaster. I truly had hoped he would stay. Her performance was flawless. There was never a flicker of alarm, never a crack in the mask. The life of the town moved on, and Thelma's garden continued to flourish, its blooms growing richer and more vibrant with each passing season. No one ever suspected that the secret to her garden's impossible success, the richness of its soil, was being fed by a gruesome and ever-growing truth buried just a few feet beneath the surface. The Angel of Oakhaven was tending her garden and her secrets with the exact same care. Monsters aren't born. They're made. And the legend of Thelma C. Gordon's creation is a story designed to chill you to the bone. To understand the woman she allegedly became, folklore tells us to look not at the respectable widow, but at the broken girl she once was. As the tale is told, Thelma wasn't born into the quiet dignity she later perfected. Her early life was one of relentless cruelty. Born into crushing poverty in a sprawling, indifferent city far from Oakhaven, she learned a hard lesson early. The world is not a kind place. The legend paints a grim picture of a callous and abusive father and a mother slowly worn away to nothing by his brutality. In this world, Thelma's first lessons were in the art of manipulation and concealment. She learned to wear a mask of perfect compliance to avoid her father's rage, and she watched her mother fade away, a victim of a world that offered her no escape. It was the men, the legend insists, who were the source of all her pain. From her own father to the leering strangers on the street, she saw them as users and aggressors. This early trauma planted a seed of cold, hard resentment in her heart, a quiet, burning hatred for the men she believed held all the power and used it only to inflict misery. Her first taste of a different life came with her marriage to Murdoch Gordon. He was a kind, older merchant who saw a young, beautiful girl and offered her an escape. He whisked her away from the grime of the city to the clean, peaceful air of Oakhaven. For a while, it must have felt like a fairy tale. She had a home, security, and the affection of a gentle man. But the legend of Thelma C. Gordon is no fairy tale. The darkness that had taken root in her childhood didn't just wither away, it lay dormant, waiting. The story whispers that her husband, for all his kindness, was still a man of his time. He controlled the money, he made the decisions, and he treated her like a prized, beautiful possession. To a woman who had spent her entire life feeling powerless, this benevolent control was just another cage, even if it was gilded. The resentment simmered just beneath the surface of their peaceful marriage. The turning point, the moment the monster was truly unleashed, was her husband's death. The official story was a sudden tragic fever. But the darker version of the tale, the one whispered in the shadows, suggests this was Thelma's first masterpiece. It was here she discovered a terrifyingly simple tool of the era: arsenic. It was a common ingredient in everything from rat poison to wallpaper, easy to get and hard to trace. Its effects, violent cramps, vomiting, convulsions, could so easily be mistaken for dysentery or cholera, common and deadly diseases of the time. As the story goes, as she watched the life drain from her husband, she didn't feel grief. She felt release, a terrifying, absolute freedom. For the first time in her life, she was in control. The house was hers. The money was hers. Her destiny was hers. She had found a way to remove obstacles silently and efficiently. and she had gotten away with it. The outpouring of sympathy from the community only reinforced her discovery. She wasn't just free, she was admired for her strength. This first alleged murder was the catalyst. It transformed a lifetime of bitterness into a cold, calculated methodology. She had found the ultimate power over the men she so despised. She could lure them in with the promise of affection, the very thing she herself had once craved. She could let them believe they were the charming suitors, winning the heart of the lonely widow. And then, at the peak of their confidence, she could take everything from them. Their money, their future, and their life. The garden became her sanctuary, her canvas, and her tomb. It was the one place where she had absolute control, where she alone decided what would live and what would die. The seeds of darkness, planted in a cruel childhood, were finally ready to bear their terrible fruit. With her husband gone, the door to Thelma's darkness was thrown wide open. And one by one, the lambs began walking willingly to the slaughter. Her home, once a picture of quiet domestic life, allegedly became a meticulously managed abattoir. The victims were numerous and varied, but they all shared a few key traits. They were men with money, men without close family, and men utterly captivated by the illusion of the Angel of Oakhaven. The first to follow Mr. Gordon, the legend says, was a traveling salesman named Arthur Mills. A handsome, confident man who lived on the road. His connections were fleeting. He saw Oakhaven as a place to finally put down roots, and Thelma as the perfect woman to do it with. For weeks, he was her devoted suitor, showering her with gifts and promises of a comfortable life. In return, Thelma offered him what he craved most, a sense of home. He had his final meal at her table, a hearty stew seasoned with her special ingredient. His body, they say, was the first to be interred beneath the burgeoning rose bushes at the back of the garden. His disappearance was easily explained. Just another salesman moving on. Next came the lonely ones. Men like Elias Thorne, a bachelor farmer who had sold his land and was looking for a companion to share his retirement with. He was a kind, quiet man. More importantly, he was wealthy and alone. He was drawn to Thelma's grace, her ability to make him feel seen and valued. In letters to a distant cousin, his only living relative, he wrote ecstatically about his incredible fortune in finding such a woman. His last letter spoke of a special dinner Thelma was preparing, a celebration of their future. After that, the letters stopped. His body, the story claims, was buried deep beneath a bed of vibrant lilies. His considerable savings now part of Thelma's growing fortune. The pattern, as the folklore describes it, was chillingly consistent. She targeted men who wouldn't be missed. She was a predator, a keen student of human nature who could spot the loneliness and desire that made a man vulnerable. She learned their histories, confirmed their isolation, and then began her masterclass in deception. There was Samuel Blackwood, a stoic rancher from out west, his pockets full from a recent cattle drive. He was enchanted by Thelma's refined company. She didn't mock his rough ways, she celebrated them. She made him believe she saw the good man beneath his gruff exterior. One evening, after they shared a bottle of fine whiskey, a bottle from which only he drank, he fell into a deep sleep from which he would never wake. The legend says he was buried near the old oak tree at the edge of the property. As her confidence grew, so did her ambition. The body count climbed. At times, she was supposedly courting 2 or 3 men at once, each believing he was the sole object of her affection. She managed their visits with the precision of a master strategist, a deadly dance of deception. The weapon was almost always poison. Arsenic was her favorite, but the legend speaks of her experimenting with strychnine or even toxic plants from her own garden. Like foxglove or deadly nightshade, she would serve it in a home-cooked meal, a glass of wine, cup of tea. It was intimate, silent, and its aftermath so easily disguised as common illness. The burials were a dark ritual. Under the cover of night, lit by a single flickering lantern, Thelma would perform her gruesome work. She was described as unnervingly strong, methodical. She would dig the graves deep, carefully replacing the soil, and the next day, plant a new rose bush or a patch of daisies over the spot. The garden was her ledger, each beautiful bloom a tombstone. Think about the sheer, horrifying number: 47 men, 47 courtships, 47 last meals, 47 clandestine burials. The seasons turned, winter would come, freezing the ground and forcing her to pause. Perhaps storing bodies in the cold root cellar until the spring thaw. Then summer would arrive, bringing with it a new crop of unsuspecting suitors and a new reason to expand her garden. With each murder, her fortune grew, allowing her to be even more generous with her charity, cementing her reputation as the Angel of Oakhaven. No one could possibly imagine that the woman funding the new church roof was doing so with the life savings of the men she'd buried under her prize-winning petunias. The garden grew, a monument to death masquerading as life, its soil saturated with the secrets of a killer. You can't bury 47 secrets forever. Eventually, the dead begin to speak. For years, Thelma Gordon's reign of terror went completely unchallenged. She was a master of her craft. But even the most perfect facade is doomed to crack. The end didn't come all at once. It began as whispers on the wind, quiet doubts that slowly grew into a storm of suspicion. The first whisper, the story goes, came from the post office. Dr. Abernathy, the town postmaster, was a man who noticed patterns. He noticed the sheer volume of mail Thelma received from men in distant towns. He saw the cycle. A flurry of passionate letters would arrive for weeks, then silence. At first, he dismissed it. But after the fifth or sixth time, a seed of unease was planted. He also noticed Thelma receiving large bank drafts, always right after one of her suitors had moved on. It was strange, but not yet proof of anything sinister. The next crack came from a man named Thomas Powell. His brother Henry, a wealthy investor from Chicago, was one of Thelma's alleged victims. But Henry wasn't a drifter. He wrote to his brother Thomas every single week. In his final letters, he spoke ecstatically of a widow in Oakhaven, a Mrs. Gordon, whom he planned to marry. He mentioned he was carrying a large sum of cash to buy a local property. And then the letters stopped cold. Thomas Powell was not a man who accepted silence. After a month, he traveled to Oakhaven himself and went straight to Thelma's cottage. She met him with a performance of practiced sorrow. His brother had left suddenly, she claimed, called away on urgent business. She even produced a farewell note, forged in a hand that looked remarkably like Henry's. But Thomas wasn't convinced. His brother was a man of routine. He would never leave without a direct word to his family. Paul went to the local constable, Jebediah Reed. Reed was a good man, but he was the law in a town where the biggest crime was usually lost livestock. The idea that the Angel of Oakhaven, the town's most respected resident, could be involved in something nefarious seemed impossible. He listened, but ultimately dismissed Paul's fears. But Thomas Powell was relentless. He stayed in town for weeks, asking questions. He spoke to Abernathy at the post office, who confirmed the strange pattern of mail. He checked the stables. No record of Henry Powell hiring a coach to leave town. The whispers were getting louder, connecting. The true turning point, however, didn't come from a person. It came from nature itself. A vicious summer storm tore through Oakhaven. Torrential rains turned the dirt roads to mud and caused flash floods. Thelma's magnificent garden was ravaged. The deluge of water washed away the topsoil, and in the storm's aftermath, something was revealed. A local boy, chasing his dog near the edge of Thelma's property, saw something odd sticking out of the mud beneath a large, half-uprooted azalea bush. A bone, thinking it was from an animal. He pulled at it, only to find it was attached to more bones. And near it, glinting in the sun, was a man's silver pocket watch. The terrified boy ran to get Constable Reed. When Reed arrived, he still wanted to believe there was a simple explanation. An old forgotten burial plot, perhaps. But the pocket watch wasn't ancient. And as he carefully cleared away more mud, he uncovered the unmistakable shape of a human skull. The whispers had just become a blood-curdling scream. Armed with Thomas Pole's insistent claims, and now this grisly, undeniable proof, Constable Reed had no choice. He obtained a warrant to search the property of Thelma C. Gordon. The time for whispers was over. It was time to start digging. When Constable Reed and a small group of deputies walked up to Thelma Gordon's pristine cottage, they weren't just serving a warrant. They were about to peel back the skin of Oakhaven and reveal the cancerous truth festering beneath. Thelma, ever composed, is said to have met them at her door with a look of mild confusion, calmly asking if there was some trouble. She maintained her innocence with a breathtaking serenity, even as the men, armed with shovels, walked past her and into her beautiful garden. The digging began where the boy had found the bone. It didn't take long. A few feet down, they uncovered the full skeleton of a man. His clothes were rotted away, but in his pocket, they found a wallet containing the identification of Henry Powell. Thomas Pole's search was over, but the horror in Oakhaven was just beginning. As news of the discovery ripped through the small town, a crowd gathered at the edge of the property, their faces a mask of disbelief and morbid fascination. They watched in stunned silence as Constable Reed, his own face pale and grim, ordered his men to keep digging. If there was one body, there could be more. They moved to the rose garden, Thelma's pride and joy. Beneath a bush of deep crimson blooms, they found another skeleton, and then another. With each discovery, a collective gasp shuddered through the crowd. The men who had courted the widow Gordon, the men they had all assumed had just moved on, were now being exhumed from their floral graves. The excavation was a systematic desecration. The beautiful garden was torn apart, flowerbed by flowerbed. The vibrant lilies, the cheerful daisies, all were uprooted to reveal the ghastly secrets they concealed. The soil, so rich and dark, gave up its dead. They found bodies in every stage of decay, from nearly clean skeletons to those more recently interred. Each shovel full of earth was a prayer answered, and a nightmare confirmed. It became a grim accounting. By the end of the first day, 12 bodies. The town was in a state of collective shock. The woman they had revered, the Angel of Oakhaven, was a monster. Her kindness was a trap, her home was a slaughterhouse, and her garden was a graveyard. And through it all, the legend says Thelma Gordon sat in her parlor calmly sipping tea. She watched from her window as her life's work, both the horticultural and the homicidal, was undone. She offered no confession, no explanation. Her silence was, in its own way, as terrifying as the crimes themselves. It was the silence of someone who knew she was so far beyond redemption that words were meaningless. The digging continued for days. The final tally, seared into the folklore of the region, was 47 bodies, unearthed from a single, suburban garden. The excavation also uncovered a gruesome collection of personal effects, wallets, watches, rings, and letters. It was a museum of the dead, a chronicle of Thelma's predatory career. The beautiful facade was shattered. Thelma C. Gordon, the widow, the gardener, the angel, was arrested and taken to the county jail, leaving behind a home that would forever be a landmark of horror and a garden transformed from a place of beauty into a stark and terrible monument to the dead. It's the perfect, blood-curdling ending to a legend. In the folklore, Thelma's trial was a media sensation. She was the demon widow, the gardener of death. She remained silent, was found guilty, and met her end on the gallows without ever saying a word. A satisfying, chilling conclusion to a terrifying tale. But here on History's Chronicles of Horror, we dig deeper. And this is where the story takes its most fascinating turn. Because, when you go looking for Thelma C. Gordon in the history books, she isn't there. After an extensive search of historical records, census data, and newspaper archives, the unavoidable truth emerges. There is no official record of a serial killer named Thelma C. Gordon. And while a few towns named Oakhaven do exist across the United States, there is no historical record of any of them being home to a 19th century mass grave that matches this legend. The constable, the postmaster, the victims, all of it. The story, in its entirety, appears to be a stunningly effective work of fiction. So why does it feel so real? Why does it persist? The legend of Thelma C. Gordon is a powerful piece of American folklore because it's a composite ghost, stitched together from the very real crimes of other female serial killers of the era. The most glaring parallel is the infamous Belle Gunness, a Norwegian-American woman in Indiana in the early 1900s. Just like the fictional Thelma, Belle was a widow who used personal ads to lure suitors to her farm. These men, often carrying their life savings, would arrive seeking marriage only to disappear. After a fire at her farm in 1908, an investigation uncovered numerous bodies buried on her property. While the confirmed number of her victims is at least 14, it's speculated she may have killed as many as 40 people. The widow persona, the luring for financial gain. The farm as a burial ground, it's the skeleton of the Thelma Gordon story. Another echo comes from Amelia Dyer, a British killer from the Victorian era. Her victims were infants, not lovers, but she operated behind the facade of a caring nurse, an angel maker, taking in unwanted children for a fee. She appeared respectable and kind, yet she was responsible for the deaths of potentially hundreds of infants, making her one of history's most prolific killers. Her case proves how easily a nurturing persona could be used as a cover for monstrous acts. Even the method, poisoning with arsenic, is historically spot on. Arsenic was largely unregulated, a common ingredient in household products, and its symptoms brilliantly mimic diseases like cholera, allowing killers to often escape detection. So the story of Thelma C. Gordon isn't history, but a reflection of it. It's a legend that captures the real anxieties of the 19th and early 20th centuries. It speaks to the fear of a world where people could vanish without a trace. It combines the most shocking elements from the true stories of killers like Belle Gunness and the societal conditions that allowed them to operate, and it condenses them into a single, terrifying figure. The number 47 is pure folkloric embellishment, designed to amplify the horror to an almost unbelievable scale. If you find these journeys into the dark corners of history and folklore as fascinating as we do, make sure you subscribe to History's Chronicles of Horror and hit that notification bell so you never miss a new investigation. So, is the story of Thelma C. Gordon true? No. But is it real? Absolutely. Her legend endures because it's more than a campfire tale. It is a perfectly constructed piece of folklore that taps into our most primal fears. It's a story about the ultimate betrayal, the betrayal of trust, of love, and of the sanctity of home. The image of a beautiful garden, a symbol of life, being turned into a mass grave is a powerfully disturbing inversion of nature itself. While Thelma is a fiction, her story serves as a dark cultural memory. It amalgamates the real-life horrors of women like Belle Gunness with the anxieties of an era, serving as a grim reminder that evil can, and often does, wear a friendly and respectable face. These legends persist because they ask us profound and unsettling questions. How well do we really know our neighbors? What secrets lie buried just beneath the tranquil surfaces of our own communities? Thelma C. Gordon may be a ghost, but she represents a truth we are often reluctant to face, that the most terrifying monsters are not those that lurk in the shadows, but those that welcome us into their homes with a warm smile. Her tale is a chilling reminder that sometimes the most beautiful roses have the deadliest thorns. What do you think? Why do these urban legends have such a powerful grip on our imagination? Let us know your theories down in the comments below. We love reading them. And if you haven't already, please like this video and subscribe to History's Chronicles of Horror. It truly helps us to keep unearthing these incredible stories. Thank you for watching.